This is the spring 2025 hiring and processing webinar, and just kind of take it from here. So, uh, for the winter session, so to kind of cover this portion that I know my colleague Sarah Allery had sent out an email back in November in regards to this type of information of, possibility of working over the holiday break and working during this winter break, this technically a non-academic period, and kind of answer some of the questions that we kind of get the majority of the time during this period of time is how many hours can the student work during winter break? And so that'd be from when we return back from the new year through to the 14th. So the last day of the winter session before spring begins. So the maximum they could work would be 40 hours per week, but they cannot work overtime. Uh, the way that the time sheet is kind of set up, the work week runs from Sunday through to Saturday. Um, and yeah, the schedule can exceed 8 hours per day as long as they do not exceed 40 hours per week total. Um, we do have a split week meaning that we have both non-academic and academic periods um, on the same week. Uh, because of that, and in the usual academic period, we have a limit of 20 hours per week. But given that it's non-academic and academic, the maximum work hours that have been um, uh, allowed would be 28. And another question we get is for students who have graduated in the fall, when would be the last day that they'd be allowed to work? So what we've been advising is for after the campus closure, the graduating students, with an exception that we are not allowing 1868s at this time due to their F1 student visa and USCIS guidelines. But for other student assistants, they can continue to work through to the end of winter session. So January 14th, 2025 would be their last day to work. But they would need to be moved over to the 1874 job code. And so the way it would kind of look would kind of be that the 1870 position would be separated effective 12/24/2024. So one day after the last day worked for the semester, and they would be rehired or hired in for the first time, under the 1874 job code, effective January 2nd, with an end date of the 14th. I have seen some transactions come in through our module that are looking correct. Some are missing the end dates, but for the most part, thank you to all who have been reading through the emails. I'm glad those are not falling on deaf ears. So I appreciate your cooperation and make sure that we follow guidelines with that. And yet to reiterate, graduating students in the 1868 job code who are under an F1 student visa, they can work only until the end of the semester. So the last day they were able to work was December 23rd, 2024, in accordance to the guidelines from USCIS. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Oh, there we go. So a note on managing your students' employment. So they are at will and non-represented at this time. As far as managing their performance, please share progress and areas of improvement needed with the student assistant, and try to open a dialogue to address performance concerns should there be any. And we do advise to not end their appointment early. It's a termination kind of a transaction in the student module without consulting with human resources or employee relations, if it is in regards to a performance issue. On the next slide. So as far as their student employment rights, obviously labor laws will still apply. You need to make sure that they have their paycheck on the last day worked. I believe we have 72-hour turnaround time to make sure that they get their final check. Yes, make sure that they have their that they take their breaks at a reasonable time, and lunch if they're make sure they have a lunch um, break set up if they're scheduled for 5 hours or more. Um, and yes, in the events of discrimination claims, that needs to be addressed with employee relations. And yeah, as far as workers' comp, I believe that they are also eligible for that as well, and they would need to contact um, the leave of absence coordinator, that kind of information. Okay. So moving into the student module, we have a number of job codes that are available for the departments to use when entering in transactions. So the most common that we'll see is the 1870 student assistant job class. Um, that's by far the most popular, the most common that we'll see. However, there are other subcategories that would fall in that kind of umbrella of uh, job class. So the student assistant would mainly perform non-academic, administrative support type work, clerical, that sort of realm of work would kind of fall in the 1870. Um, However, there's also many other subcategories in the case that if they are work study, so if they're awarded a federal work study, they will need to be paid out through the 1871 job code. So that's for on-campus work study. And in much more reduced cases, if they have off-campus work to be performed, it would be done through the 1872 job code. Also for our students who are under an F1 visa, the student visa, they would need to be classified under the 1868 job code. So that's non-citizen status. There are a limited number of kind of cases where this would be applicable. During the spring semester, we normally see the majority of these during the summer, but 1874, known as the taxable student assistance, this is based on the student's enrollment. So if they are under the half-time enrollment threshold, so the ruling would be that half-time enrollment is considered 6 units for undergraduates and 4 units for graduates. So if they fall beneath that, then they would need to be classified as an 1874 job code. And that's the reason why we advise for departments to hire those students who have graduated for that short period of time, since technically they're enrolled in no units for winter session. They would need to be hired under 1874 in that particular case. Now, in the case of the students continuing, that they can remain as 1870, but in this particular kind of use case, we would see the 1874 job code being used. But yes, there are a number of times when we'll see students working during the spring semester and they would need to be classified under 1874 when they fall below that enrollment threshold. And the second most popular job class would be the 1150, the instructional student assistant job class. And this would kind of fall in line with work that is more like tutoring, grading, proctoring, that kind of realm of work, assisting with a faculty member type work. Um, they are also represented, or rather, they are represented, as 1870s are not at this moment. They fall under the R11, the United Auto Workers, the UAW bargaining unit. And kind of this similar way with the student assistants, they also have work study specific job codes. So in the case that they're doing on-campus work study, it would be 1151, and 1153 would be if they are off campus. And if they are not getting work study, but they are performing off-campus work, then that would fall under the 1152 job code. Now, a question that we get sometimes is, uh, performing a background check for student workers, when is it applicable, when is it not? And, kind of like with all things, it sort of depends, but here are the general kind of rules. And when I say student workers, this would apply to student assistants, the ISAs, the teaching associates, and graduate assistants. So they would only be required to undergo a background check if required by law. So this would mean if their job duties involve working with minors, if they are sworn CSU police personnel, or cadets and dispatchers, if their positions involve access to stored criminal offender record information, patients, drugs, or medication, or if they have cash handling responsibilities, then they would. However, if you do have more questions, whether, to kind of assess whether or not they would need to go through the background check process, please direct those to backgroundchecks@csun.edu. That would be the email you can use. And yes, so the sign-in process. So all student workers will need to sign in if it is their first appointment or they haven't worked at CSUN in 18 months. So these sign-ins are conducted by appointment only. So to begin this process, you would need to contact HR at the HR customer service at csun.edu email. In this email, you would attach a copy of the completed new employee sign-in form that's available on our website. And they should respond to you within 48 hours in usual business hours between Monday and Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. They should respond to you by then. For more information, you can visit our website. I included the link. This presentation will be available on the HR Toolkit shortly. It may not be up just now, but if anyone needs it, immediately, at the end of this presentation, just feel free to reach out to me via email, via Teams, however, and I can send you a copy of this. So kind of going over the 1870s, once again, a little bit more of like the business rules. All student employees require an appointment end date. So in the case here for 1870s, when you enter them in at the student module, please use the spring semester end date. In this case, this would be May 23rd, 2025. And once a student is hired, they can be terminated and rehired based on the department's need. But again, like we've mentioned before, if there's any kind of performance issues and they need to be terminated early, we would recommend that you reach out to employee relations first. Before the end of the academic year, this is kind of more perspective. I know we're just barely starting the year off, but once we're near the end, maybe closer to May, the beginning of May's pay period, maybe inquire with your student in regards to their summer enrollment plans. That way you can hire or separate them as necessary. Obviously, I'll have a presentation in May to kind of go over more in detail of how that would work. But kind of like I mentioned earlier, that there would be kind of a transition period where if they are not enrolled in the summer, they probably have to move into the 1874 position for the months of June and July. But more to come on that in another webinar. Right now, we'll just try to focus on spring. It affected January 1st, 2025. The minimum wage is now $16.50 per hour. Just want to put that out there because I think I saw a few hires that were being done at 16. So those will need to be corrected. So all students under the 1650 that were done prior to the new year will be handled internally through an HR process. So we should have already brought them all up to the new rate. However, existing hires at 1650 or above, so if the students were already at that rate or beyond that, they would not receive any kind of automatic rate adjustment. For a merit increase, you would use the student job data change form that's available on our website. If you wanted to perform, an increase and to evaluate their work, usually it's, 6 months of meritorious performance, then you would be able to grant them a rate increase. But as far as any kind of equity type increase or uh, that more in line with those kinds of inquiries, please reach out to your director of financial operations or division liaison first. Um, but also class and comp would also be able to help um, as far as questions on equity. Okay. So the action reasons available, that would be, obviously they're three-letter codes, but I'll just kind of go through them real quick. So the first one would be hire concurrent job. It's the kind of the standard one when you are entering in a transaction for the first time. There's the termination and temporary appointment. That's what's used when you want to separate an employee. Um, I'll go a little bit more into this, but something important to know is that the effective date you'd use is always the last day worked plus 1 calendar day. So even if the separation is on a Friday, and you would enter that termination date, it would fall on a Saturday. I mean, that's fine. Sometimes we've seen this where departments will enter in the termination effective date the following Monday. That wouldn't be the case here. So 1 calendar day, not business day. And please, as a reminder, try to enter in your terminations for students only after all their hours have been entered and approved in the timesheet. Otherwise, it kind of can create more issues along the line in issuing out their payment in a timely manner. There's also the rehire code, um, pretty self-explanatory. And there's also the pay rate change, student pay change transaction. And like I mentioned earlier, that would, in the case for a merit increase, once that student job data change form is complete and kind of goes through its internal process, at the department level, you'd be able to submit that transaction in the student module. An important note on that, it always needs to fall on the first day of the pay period. Otherwise, it can kind of create some issues in trying to issue out the student's pay if they're at two separate rates in a given month. So just wanted to put that out there. But okay, more of a step-by-step guide. I know we may have some newer employees with us who maybe aren't familiar with this, so I'll kind of just go through this. So in the CSUN portal, when you sign in, you would go into the HR navigation tab, and then from here you'd select HR admin, and then select student employment. So your page may not look exactly like this. This is a screenshot from my access, so it could be a little different, but ultimately what you're looking for is something that says student employment. That should bring you to this page, the student employee search page. From here, you'd search for the student you'd want to hire, or if you need to update their record. I recommend that you search them using their employee ID and not their name, as some students sometimes have very similar names, or there could be kind of a confusion there with hiring the incorrect student altogether, which can kind of obviously create a lot more issues. Once we get their sign-in packet, we realize that, uh-oh, the department hired the wrong person altogether. So we recommend that you either use the employee ID or national ID if you have that. That would be their social. From here, once you search for them, it should take you to this page, the student job summary page. And here you can add a student concurrent job. So this is what you would use for a brand new hire, or if you're entering in a new transaction for a particular department. Or if they already have an existing position in your department, you need to add in a new row, then you would use the student current job section. That's where you can add more transactions onto the already existing job record. Oops. And yes, let's say you wanted to hire a brand new 1870 student. I also include 1150 because it would essentially be the same process. So it kind of look more along the lines of this. So you would enter in the effective date. Here I've used the start of the semester, so January 15th, 2025. They use the applicable action reason. It should normally default if it's a brand new hire to HIR. So all you need to fill in would be the reason, and it would only be one item in that drop down. So it'd be, or when you click the magnifying glass. So that'd be CON. The position number, you would either enter it manually if you already know it, or you'd be able to search for it. I believe there's a way to, when you click that magnifying glass, to do a search for like an advanced search, and you'll be able to search for your particular department, for your job code that you're looking for. If there's multiple within, your department, it's gonna be kind of easier to check. I know there's also different positions within the same department that have different reporting structures. So just want to put that out there. So you enter in your position number. It should auto-populate the rest of the information aside from hourly rate and expected end date, which you would need to enter. Here I've placed an hourly rate of $16.50, so that'd be the minimum as of January 1st, and an expected end date of the spring semester, so May 23rd, 2025. On the next slide. So let's say that we're doing a merit increase for an 1870s student. They've been performing well. They've shown a lot of promise. You complete the student employee job data change form. It goes through the appropriate channels, and now it's time to enter it in through the module. So here I chose a particular date to kind of illustrate that. Sometimes the pay periods do not start always on the 1st. So in the case for February, the first day of the pay period actually begins on January 31st. It's a little confusing, but that's just the way we can get to ensure that there's enough working days for each month. Okay, so here the effective date is January 31st, 2025, and the action reason PAYSPC. The rest of the information should already be populated since you would be adding in a row on an existing transaction. And all you need to do is update the hourly rate. So here I'm bumping it up, 50 cents from 16.50 to 17. And then you just hit save, and that should be it. Okay, so for separating an 1870 or an 1150, it'll be the same type of process. Kind of look more along the lines like this. So you would enter in the effective date. Here I selected March 15th, 2025. So that means that the last day worked was March 14th, 2025. You would select TER, END, and you wouldn't adjust the expected end date. You would just leave as is. The driver here, as far as the transaction, would be the effective date on these terminations. So once that's submitted, just hit save, and then we will kind of review on our end to make sure everything looks good, and make sure all the hours have been entered and approved in the timesheet before this transaction is entered in the module. All right, so kind of a brief summary on 1150, the instructional student assistants. Like I mentioned earlier, they are academic student employees under the R11 bargaining unit. So the same union as the teaching associates and graduate assistants. And they do need appointment letters generated to stipulate their job's duration, their job duties, etc. These need to be reviewed for every semester, and they can't have any gaps between continuing appointments. Also wanted to advise that the departments check the minimum and maximum salary rates via the CSU salary schedule page. I believe I add a link to that at the end of the presentation. There should be some resources, and there should be a site where you can check, for any job code, not just 1150s, but if you do have questions on, I'm hiring an 1870, what is the minimum, what is the maximum allowed for their hourly rate, will you be able to check through this website. Okay. So again, essentially the same for 1150s on action and reasons. So I don't need to kind of go through all of it, but one thing that is different would be the DTA APT, the data change new temporary appointment. So this is used for extensions, but this is also used for their pay rate changes. So they don't use the PAY SPC code that we mentioned with 1870. So in the case that you do need to do an increase on 1150, it would have to be done through this code. But yeah, aside from that, everything else should be relatively the same. Yeah, so just wanted to illustrate an example of what that would look like for those type of transactions with fall under the DTA APT action reason. This is showing what it would look like for an extension for at the end of a spring semester, uh, appointment. What it would look like to extend their appointment. So here we're using the next day, the next calendar day. So that'd be May 24th, 2025, and we've extended them out to the end of the projected fall 2025 semester. But again, we kind of have to match up with whatever is going to be stipulated in the appointment letter. All right, I'll take a brief moment here, just also just to catch my breath. But as far as questions on students, let's take a look through some of the messages. I know there's been quite a lot of activity here. And thank you to everyone for the personal messages. I truly appreciate those. Let's see. Renee Lambert, is this where you go to terminate as well? In regards to this student module, yes. This is where those transactions would all kind of reside. You would do the hiring, rehiring, and separations. So my graduating student last day worked was December 18th. So if their last day worked was December 18th, then the last day for a separation, the transaction would be December 19th. You can feel free and send me an email. Uh, we can kind of touch base on that if you have more questions, but I don't see any other questions at this moment, so I'll move into part-time faculty hiring. Okay. Okay, so the job codes used in the part-time faculty module. So we do have some academic student employees in the R11 bargaining unit that reside here, namely the teaching associates, graduate assistants, and monthly graduate assistants. But by and large, the majority of transactions that we'll see from semester to semester are for our part-time faculty, the 20 through 58, under the R03 bargaining unit. Just a reminder to everybody, for spring 2025, and for spring in general, one semester appointment durations only for the semester will be done through the part-time faculty module. If you need to adjust, any type of entitlement, it's been, you've been checked over with faculty affairs to make sure that, okay, it's time for them to get moved from an S1 to a Y1, or 1-year appointment, or a 3-year appointment, and that needs to be done through a PAR form. So I'll kind of go into that a little bit later of the personal action request form. And as far as monthly graduate assistants, so those are a short-term assignment. We ask that you submit a PAR over to the HR operations team, to your assigned contact, to do the hire and the termination all in one kind of fell swoop, just to ensure that we don't overpay them. Okay. And so the job actions available here are obviously the hire concurrent. That would be for any new faculty, kind of what I highlighted here on the right side of the page. So when you search for a faculty member, you would select hire new PTF employee. And for continuing faculty, you can look up a job action for an existing record that fall under the job action CAN. So that's termination canceled appointment. TIM, so that's pay rate change, time-based change, is what that would align with. And REA is a reappointment, or essentially kind of like an extension. So let's say an employee worked, in the fall, but they're also going to be working in the spring in a one semester appointment. So you'd be using this transaction. Um, by and large is the one we're most likely to see is the reappointment. So just take you to this page. I know the screenshot's kind of a little stretched out, but hopefully everyone can kind of see what it would kind of look like. Um, so the job action's available for a rehired faculty. So you would search and select the inactive employee and you would just update their paid units. I know this example is from last year, but the same logic would apply. You would enter in their paid units. The duration of employment should either reflect S1 or if they're already been adjusted. I believe that should be grayed out. But yeah, you would just update their paid units. Yeah, you just hit save. Let's see here. I had to black out quite a bit of there. And yes, so background checks for part-time faculty. So requesting a background check is required for the following. So all final candidates and new hires. So and also for anyone who was rehired after a break in service of 12 months or more and has not had a background check within the past 12 months on this in campus. We have more information on our background checks website. And like I mentioned before, if you have more questions, you can direct them towards backgroundchecks@csun.edu email. And yeah, just a reminder, this is mainly what I'm speaking on is part-time faculty. So for the TAs and the GAs, those fall under the student worker rules that I've covered earlier. Yes, for new sign-in. So after the background check clears, the employee can begin the sign-in process. We are asking that all sign-ins for new and returning hires to be done on or before January 15th, 2025. Failure to comply may result in a late hire with impact to the employee's academic pay. This is kind of just a ruling just based on the completion of the I-9 that we need to make sure that this is done on or before January 15th. But yes, just putting that out there. Sometimes this can kind of get a little difficult just as far as scheduling and figuring out an appointment for the employee, but this is kind of the nature of the job. Sign-ins are conducted by appointment only. So like I mentioned before, you reach out to HR customer service with an attachment of the new employee sign-in form, and they'll respond within 48 hours. And should you need more information, we also have the HR website with links and more information. So the default system appointment dates for spring 2025 are as follows. So it would be for the 2358 and 2354. So the part-time lecturers and teaching associates would be basically the same. It would match up with the kind of the academic year set up for spring 2025. The one that looks a little different would be graduate assistants. So the 2355 job code. Technically, this is still academic year. However, due to the specifics of their job code, they start a little bit later. So they start with aligning with the February pay period. So the first day would be January 31st, and they would end at the end of June. So they would be due 5 equal installments as far as their payments are concerned. As far as the monthly GA, the 2325, so that usually doesn't follow semester dates. So that can be, again, for a short-term appointment. Can I just give like an example? Just see it doesn't have to align with the AY kind of dates that I've delineated out. But yes, as far as entry and approval deadlines. So their first pay warrant of spring 2025 is inclusive of the days worked in January all through February. And so that first check will issue March 1st, 2025. And what we ask the departments is to have everything entered by the end of this month. So Thursday, January 30th, 2025. And the approval deadline would be Friday, January 31st, 2025. Now, this is to say that if there is a late start that you wouldn't be able to enter them into the part-time faculty module, you still can. It doesn't close necessarily. This is more just a deadline that we're trying to enforce to make sure that everyone has their transactions entered in as timely as possible. But if obviously there's any kind of delays or anything like that, they can still enter that in through the module. But yes, transaction must be keyed into the part-time faculty module and approved in time to guarantee processing for February's pay warrant. That's the reason we're kind of asked to have everything done as soon as possible, or once you have that information. Yes, as far as generating an appointment letter, so this would be available through the Solar HR side. This is available for those who do have access to that as well. And I provided the query name. So this has been I believe it's been updated as of this week for spring 2025 information. So I know there's issues with in the past of some of the fields having older information, but it should be reflecting correctly now. So lecturers on a 3-year appointment will need letters generated manually if they do not have any changes posted. So I know departments have told me in the past that they generate letters semester by semester, and even if an employee falls under a Y3 or 3-year appointment and they don't have any kind of updates to their time base, they still generate a letter anyways. Those will not show up on this list, so you would need to just enter that information yourself and generate the letter based off of the template that's available on the toolkit. So the faculty member, if they are not showing up in the appointment letter query, a way to troubleshoot this is if you leave all the fields blank, run, and you filter down the list to your respective college. It may take a minute to get all of the results, but that would be kind of a way to kind of figure out it. Maybe one of the search options maybe took them out for whatever reason. It's a lot goes into these reports, and sometimes these things they're meant to make things a little easier, but they can maybe complicate things sometimes. But yes, for more instructions, we do have a quick guide available on the HR toolkit. And yeah, should you have questions, feel free to reach out to your operations technician. We'll be more than happy to troubleshoot that. Yes, as far as AY pay warrant distribution for spring-only hires, we'll kind of look as the following. This is also available on the payroll website. This is just kind of at a glance what this would look like, and how the pay would kind of be issued out in 6 equal installments throughout the year, in the academic year. So it kind of issues out. I also wanted to provide for those who are teaching both semesters. So in the case that you have a lecturer who is working fall 2024, and now they're going to be working spring 2025, it would look something more along the lines of this. Something to note about their 6th fall, or their 6th warrant, the one they'll be issuing out in August. So that is technically it falls in line with their fall 2024 payment, and it'll be reflective of the time base that they had at that time. So I know there's sometimes questions during that period of time of, why does this look a little bit different than the payments I've gotten, for the spring? Well, that's the reason why. It's kind of meant to settle them out for the work performed throughout the fall. So yeah, for more questions on that, I would recommend reaching out to your payroll technician as far as the issuance and these kinds of types of settlement pay. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Right, so the Personnel Action Request Form, so PAR or the PAR form, this is used when a correction or action is needed that cannot be done via the module. So for example, if you are rehiring an employee whose salary is now outdated and because their rate falls under the new minimum salary it would be grayed out and it wouldn't allow you to proceed. This is just more of like a precaution just to make sure that, sometimes departments have, a huge roster of employees to get through, and they might be, trying to go through those really quickly. Um, in the event of that, we just want to make sure that no one's being paid um, under the current minimum rate. So those would need to be done through a form. There's also the event of a lecturer who is teaching 15 units, so that would be full time. That is not possible to be entered in through the part-time faculty module, so we would need a PAR form. So we do have a list available in the HR toolkit that has templates and descriptions, multiple kind of scenarios that might come up and are more kind of the frequently used ones. You can go through that. That'll be available in the HR toolkit. And yes, so the PAR is not needed to hire if you are just having a transaction that's after the entry deadline. If you're able to enter the module, just let us know, just so we can try to expedite it and include it in with our transactions that need to go over to payroll. It's kind of like goes from the departments, goes over to the operations team. We try to validate that information, and then that goes over to payroll. Once we have all the new sign-ins, make sure that everything's accounted for. And we do ask that the PARs kind of fall on the same kind of deadline as the sign-ins. So we want to make sure that we have those in by the 15th, so by the start, if possible. Obviously, transactions may come up that are beyond that, or you're made aware of that afterwards. But yeah, this is more just like a soft deadline. We're just trying to remind the departments to have those in by that date. And yes, on the PARs and on timeliness, we have our rehired annuitant faculty. So this is faculty who have retired and are now back. A reminder that we received from CalPERS, as they have been providing us with quite a lot of fees due to having these transactions entered in after the 30 days from the start of their the start of their hire. But they've reduced that payroll processing window from that CalPERS used to provide 90 days, but it's been greatly reduced. So we do ask that these are a very high priority. All of them are very high priority, but for these in particular, if you have a faculty member who's a rehired annuitant, try to have these done first and send them over to the operations technician as soon as you have it. So yes, like with the others, we're asking to have them in by January 15th. Trying to keep these processing fees to a minimum that the campus has to pay out. But yes, as far as what can you do in the module versus what goes on the PAR, just wanted to make a chart kind of help illustrate that. So in the module, you can do hires, time-based increases or decreases, you can cancel, you can rehire, and you can reappoint for the following semester, or for the current semester rather. And on the PAR, any kind of corrections for anything that was entered in the module. If you have any type of leaves or leave of absences that need to be done for a faculty member, it'd be done through PAR. Adjusting to full-time, rehired annuitants, an outdated base salary, and should you need more examples, you can just check the PAR list on the HR toolkit. A brief kind of segue into more payroll territory, but I will do my best to kind of cover this information. This kind of will fall in line, in the February kind of pay periods when the majority of the impact would be for these part-time faculty and the TAs and GAs. So Master Payroll Certification, also known as MPC. So the departments will have to use the certification process to review all salaried employees that are scheduled to be paid for a given pay period. This is a way for you to ensure that employee is entitled to, if the employee is entitled to full or partial pay, you would certify them along with a corrected note in the comment box. They also provide an example. So, it's due to a time-based change. If the employee has any type of dock days or if they were separated early, just to prevent sending over an NPC exception form that the payroll team would have to process. So the exceptions would be terminated employees, employees on unpaid leave status, new hires or rehires, an effective date hire, then final NPC. So the NPC dates are published on the payroll calendar that's available on our website, and we have an initial and a final date. Um, but yeah, those dates are published on our payroll calendar. Another exception would be any type of assignment changes, or rather, right, like a transfer. So be another term for it. But yes, the difference between NPC, initial, and final. So for the initial, it's to make sure that all changes have been entered. Um, Now this is done pretty early, so it's all changes that are going to be reflected are have to be done prior to 6 a.m. on that date for them to show up. And for final, only the terminations, new hires, and dock days, if they're approved, will be on there. Yeah, so the exception form is used when the employees are not reflected on that certification process. Um, any hire or rehire that's done in the module, after final NPC, they'll require an exception form. There's also the case of mid-semester time-based changes. So, let's say a faculty member is going on leave and you need someone to kind of cover their classes and is kind of done in the middle of the semester. Um, you know, you would enter in their time-based increase, but you would need to, certify NPC and leave a comment for payroll so that they're aware this will have impact on pay. For any NPC questions, please contact your payroll technician. I think we're at the end here. And yes, like I mentioned before, there are some resources from the material that I've covered in this presentation. Will all be found here. Get more information on bargaining contracts, particularly for R03 or R11. That will be found here. And yes, for more questions on faculty, I recommend you reach out to the Office of Faculty Affairs. But for more of the processing or hiring, you can reach out to HR operations. And I kind of provided a quick little chart, an updated chart on the roster contact for the time being. But yeah, I think that might be it. So does anyone have any questions at this time? I think I see the chat and it's quite a lot in here. Oh boy, let's take a look. Student works five or more hours, they should have a 15-minute paid lunch and a 30 to 60-minute unpaid lunch. Yes, so per California labor law, a 30-minute unpaid meal period is required for a student working 5 or more hours a day. And yes, a paid 15-minute break, correct. Let's take a look. See any questions. Yes, yes, I saw that one of the questions on the HR toolkit, the spring 2025 appointment letters templates are showing spring 2024. Yes, that was an error. I'm already working with the professional development team to upload the correct appointment letter templates. But really, if possible, if you could just change that date over to spring 2025, I believe the information should still be the same, and it should still work with the appointment letter query and the fields that are available there. Yeah, let's see if there's any other questions here. Key deadline. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. So question, when inputting their units, I believe this is for student assistants. I know that if enrollment hits a certain threshold, a 3-unit class then counts as a 6-unit class in terms of paid units. I think we may need to Yeah, speak offline on that. Oh, yeah, I see. Thank you, Joe, for responding. Yeah. Let's see if there's any others here. Um, yeah, so should we use the PDF or Excel par form? Yeah, that's also something I'm trying to work with professional development team. I sent over the par forms in PDF format, but for whatever reason, we have the Excel ones. Uh, I don't know what happened. Um, I would suggest maybe just scrolling. The time being, it's still going to get uploaded, so this should be in the new one shortly. However, if you want to find it, the essentially the same kind of par form document in PDF format would be available in the fall 2023 section. So you just need to scroll down in the HR toolkit and you should be able to find it. Um, but yes, as far as let's see, what is the difference between rehire and reappoint? Okay, so rehire is to bring them back from a terminated status. So if an employee has worked, was separated, and you need to bring them back, that would be the case you do is rehire. Reappoint is essentially, you can think of it almost as an extension. So let's say you have a faculty member who worked in fall of 2024, and they're going to be continuing on, remain in active status, then you would use the reappoint. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. I think that might be it. I think there might be some other questions, but for anyone else who's still here, just want to say thank you so much for attending. I'll stay on if anyone has further questions, but for everyone else, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Stay safe and take care of each other.